Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the I Will Aim podcast. And our topic for today is storytelling your way to fame and success with Dinma Mayalafam. She's a founder, DNA imprint, biography writer, speech reader, and coach for non-native English speaker leader. Dinma is a speech reading and coaching expert dedicated to help non-native English speaking leaders, especially those who have risen from humble beginning to success, telling her to story and communicate confidently. She specializes in speaking for leaders on stage worldwide and preparing them to deliver eloquent and impactful speech. Dinma's journey began at the age of 14, when she faced public speaking humiliation after reading in front of 879 students. Instead of giving up, she persists by joining the board of lectors at her home church, where she practiced for almost a year. On September 8, 2007, Dinma was chosen to speak in front of nearly 2,000 people. She delivered a powerful performance, and in that moment, she discovered her life's mission to be the voice of those who struggle to speak for themselves and to teach them how to confidently represent themselves on stage. Today, Dinma helps leaders who struggle with public speaking find their voice and tell their story on stage in books. Through her work, she transformed hesitant speaker into confident communicator in 6 weeks, empowering them to deliver their message with clarity and authority.
I'm
Welcome, Dinma.
fine. How are
How are you
you?
doing today? Good, good. Thank you for being my guest today. I'm really excited about this topic. Let's start with the first question. Can you share a
Okay.
little bit about your journey?
Well, I never planned to be doing what I'm doing today. Of course, I've taken the time to read over the years, but to take it as a job, it was not planned. So it began when I was done with school 2014. I graduated, served. In my country, we have a 1 year mandatory service. So you're to serve as a corps member. So I served, and after that, there was no job. I looked for jobs, nothing. And then I remember my dad would always reach out to me every once in a while because I had moved out of the house. And he would ask me, you know how to write. Why not write something? The way I saw it or the way I imagined it was writing was you only had to write a book for yourself. I had no idea how content creation or things like that worked. So I felt I needed to write a book, print, and then look for a traditional publisher to publish. And then I start the marketing. It will take a lot of time, a lot of money, and it is not a promised way to success financially. So I told myself I didn't want to write. He would reach out and say, oh, why not try something? And I kept saying no, I didn't want to. And so I decided I wasn't going to do it. I got a job. The story of the job is quite a long one. If we have the time, I might be able to talk about it. We have the time, Will. Okay,
Yep,
so
go ahead.
2021, after the pandemic had passed, I was sitting in front of my house one day, and then the security guard of a school close by to the house happened to be a friend of mine too. We usually would greet as neighbors. So he saw me and he walked up to me. We greeted and he said, there's an opening in the school. Would I want to be a part of it? I said, okay, I would come for the interview if that's what it would take. And he said, okay, no problem. And we parted ways. And the day of the interview, he told me, try and come at this time to come for the interview. So I showed up. I was interviewed, but I had no experience. But still, I showed up for the interview. It was for a class assistant role. So it wasn't, you didn't need a lot of experience to do that. So I was told to meet the school owner towards evening of the next day. When we met, she said, oh, normally she would not have employed someone with no experience, but because she was desperate for someone to replace the class assistant who just left, she would take me. And then she asked me one question. She said, what else can you do? And I told her I can write. She said, okay, if you can write, why not write a play for the graduates of that year? They were graduating in a few months' time, let's say 2 months' time. So she said, why not write a play for them? Can you do that? I said, yes, I can. And then she asked me to. So the first 3 days I was in the school, I wasn't working as a class assistant. I was writing. So I would write, give it to her, she would edit it, give her corrections, and I would go back and work on it. So I did that for 3 days. And on the third day, it was approved. So she told me, when you come tomorrow, don't bother going to that empty room where you write. Just go straight to the class you are supposed to teach in. She had already shown me the class. So I said, okay, no problem. That morning, I had my bath, I was ready for work. Now I was ready for work. I had been coming, but I was not working. So I stepped into the class. As
Mm.
soon as I put my feet there, it was a kindergarten class. As soon as I stepped in, I knew I was in the wrong place. The peace and clarity I felt those 3 days that I was writing, I did not feel it this time around. I felt like I was going into a place I am not supposed to be. I felt peace writing those 3 days. But now I felt like this is not where I want to be. I didn't feel that joy. I didn't feel that excitement. So I dragged my feet for the next few days and I made up my mind I was going to resign. But because she gave me a chance, I promised that I would not just walk out on her. I told her I would stay until the end of the term, but I would not be resuming next term. That's what I believe I can do
Mm.
for you. If you were fair to me, I should be kind enough not to just walk out on you on short notice. So that was it. I told her I was going to resign. I would be ending my term with them, but I won't be coming back. And then I made a decision. If I'm going to resign, what else can I do? Of course, writing now. I now understood again my how do I explain this? My joy, or
You give.
it has now been rekindled. It was dead a long time ago when I had to go through school. I was done with school. So there were things keeping me down. So, but the moment I started, it was reignited again. And I said I would go back to it. But I made myself a promise. If I'm going to go back, then I have to earn at least the salary I was being paid. If I'm going to leave a paid job, then I can't go home and sit. If I'm going to write, if I decide I'm going to be writing now as a job, then I would have to do it and earn money from it. So that was how I started writing August 2021. That was how my journey started. Then the speaking
Wow.
part, I've always loved to speak. I've done that for over 17 years. Ever since I started 14, when I was 14, I never stopped. I'm 32 now, and I have done that every time. So I never stopped. I've always been an active member of every board of lecture in every church that I've ever attended or still attend. So for the last 17 years, I have been reading in front of people. And I told myself there are people who are struggling, who cannot read. My father, I've had to represent him in several meetings. So I knew it was something I could do. The stage was my baby. I enjoyed standing in front of people. So I combined both things that I could do and I said, this is what I want to do. This is the job that I want to do. I want to write biographies, people's stories, because I love to tell stories, and I want to speak on behalf of those who cannot do it for themselves. That's my journey in a nutshell.
Thank you very much for sharing your journey. Next, we're going to go to a shout out. I think I usually dedicate my every episode to someone, and today I'm going to dedicate this episode to my wife. Her name is Jane. So this episode's for you, Jane. Who do you want to dedicate this
Okay,
episode to?
I'll be dedicating to my husband because for every time I've had to do a thing like this, he has to take care of the kids and cover for me. So I'm dedicating this to him because he gives me enough time to be able to push my career forward. So thank you, Afam. That's his name.
Yep. Thank you for doing the shout out. I want to now deep dive to your story. You talk about being a writer and then discovering your love for telling a story. Now I want to deep dive a little about it. You discover your love for storytelling when you were 14. But what inspired you to pursue that as a career?
Okay. I wrote my first book at age 8, anyways. That was when I wrote my first book.
Wow,
Yes, I wrote
8 years old.
at age, but it never sold any copy.
Wow.
So I wrote that book, and I remember showing it to my father when he came to visit me. I was in a boarding school, so my dad came to visit. I showed him the book, and he said, okay, the book was okay. He made some corrections, asked me to work on them, and said if I can bring it back home, he was going to consider publishing it for me. So I said, okay. But then I
Wow,
was
impressive, 8 years old.
so I was handing out the books to my classmates and saying, "Oh, this is the book I wrote," because they saw me working on it. And when they asked me, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm writing a story." "What are you writing?" I said, I'm writing my book." I wasn't even considering publishing, but I enjoyed telling the story. And people were, "Oh, can I see that book you wrote?" I gave it to them. It kept moving from class to class, and it got missing. So till date, I don't remember what I wrote, but I know that it was interesting enough to be passed down from class or from hand to hand.
Next question: storytelling can evoke strong emotion. How do you ensure your story resonate deeply with the audience?
I always go for one thing when I'm writing: passion. I'm a
Hmm.
passionate storyteller. That's one thing I know that I am really good at. It comes, or how do they put this? That's my USP: passion. I always tell every story with passion. I ensure that I can wear the shoe. Is hard, but I try to wear it for a few minutes while I'm writing that story. Imagine that I am going through it or someone I know is going through it. And because story, like you say, invoke a lot of emotion. It's true for me. There are stories I have to write and I have to rest. I write a part and I have to rest mentally. I do not go close to it for a few days because of the kind of emotions it brought out of me. But I also want it to do the same thing, because if your story cannot invoke emotion, then it will not make that impact that I always look for. So, because my plan or my goal is to ensure that the story I write impacts people, I ensure that I write it as passionately as possible so that the reader can feel the story, they can feel the pain, the joy, the happiness, the sadness, the grief, the loss, whatever it is I'm trying to share. They can feel it, and that way I am making a difference. So that's what I go for.
Thank, thank you for sharing that you focus on passion and getting into the character. I think that's really powerful. My next question is: do you find the different mediums like spoken words or written storytelling require different approach? How do you adapt your story to each of the format?
Okay. I do only two formats:
Okay.
speaking and writing. So recently, I was at the World Custom Organization. I was to present a speech there, and I'm not a custom officer. What took me there was to tell a story my father suffered in their hands, and I needed them to understand. I wanted them to also explain to me. Now, the reason I'm talking about this experience is when I went there, the way I would write is not the same way I would speak. When I had to tell them the story, I need to focus on the points that I need to hit home. So I don't have the time for a lot of description
Mm,
because it's not writing. So, but if I was writing the story, it would probably take a lot of pages because I would describe everything. I would probably try to describe what he was wearing the day he went to the airport, or I would try to describe what he looked like the day he came back home. But because I'm speaking, I get to the point. So in when both of the mediums require different approach. If you're writing, you have a lot of pages. You can describe as much as you can. Now I'm speaking from the point of a biographer. Means I'm writing a book. I'm not talking about a LinkedIn post. So because it's a book, I need to describe to ensure that the reader can feel it. There's no time to show the emotions on my face. When I'm speaking, you can see it on my
mm,
face if I'm passionate about what I'm saying. But when you're writing, they don't get to hear your voice. They do not get to see your face. So they cannot feel that thing you are feeling. You cannot show
mm,
it in 5 minutes. So in writing, you have a lot of time or a lot of pages, a lot of space to describe, because in describing everything, you bring the reader into the story. But in speaking, you get to the point, you hit the hammer or the nail in the head, you stick to what you need to say and just finish it. You're sure that this is what you want to say, people can hear you, and you put in a lot of emotions on your face. So as I'm talking, you can feel I'm passionate
Mm.
about what I'm saying because of the way I'm using my body language. So in writing, there's no time for body language. Description matters a lot. Description and narration. But when it comes to spoken words, you use everything that you have. The use of
Okay.
stage, your voice, your tonality, your expression. It's important that they can feel that. So those are the different approaches that I use for both
Thank
medium.
Thank you for sharing that. Next question. Can you share a specific moment when one of your story made a significant impact on someone?
Okay. I wrote a memoir about my life. Now, I said I wrote my first book at 8. It was also a way of escaping abuse and bullying that I had to go through in boarding school. I was in boarding school at age 8. So what it meant was that I was the youngest. I'm not even saying it to say it meant. I was actually the youngest person in that school.
Hmm.
And my classmates were 2, 3, 4 years older than I am. So the bullying were not just from the senior students. I was experiencing bullying right in my class. So
Wow.
there was no escape at all. When I was done hiding from the senior students, I have to deal with my classmates. Now, I started to find an escape. And I remember writing my story when I became an adult. I wrote that story in 2021 after I left the teaching job. In my story, I was talking about what I experienced and I was encouraging parents because we have a system here where parents send their children to school a lot earlier. Everybody's in a hurry.
Hmm.
We do not have a standard. So a child can be two in a class, and there's a 3-year old and there's a 4-year old in that same class for no reason. And then sometimes we do what we call double promotion. A child does well. In my own case, I could read really well as a child, so I was double promoted. So for that reason, I skipped 2 classes in primary school, not because I was ill, but because they felt I was way ahead academically. So therefore, they moved me 2 classes higher, not at once. One in primary one, and then when I was in primary six, I didn't do that. So I then moved to boarding school at age 8, and I wasn't prepared mentally and emotionally for that. So when I started to share my story, I've shared it on several stages as an adult. I was trying to tell parents, or I still try to tell parents every time I have the opportunity, that a child, even if a child is a prodigy, they are doing exceedingly well academically, is still not enough. A child needs to grow emotionally.
Yes.
So there are a lot of things to look out for. Don't just say, oh, my child is always the first in his class. He does well, he gets his A plus all the time. So therefore, I want to move them. No. You need to consider that they need to grow on the same level with their mates. So even when they need to move academically, they have to excel all round. You need to watch them, be sure that they can handle being in a class with people much older. Can they speak for themselves? Can they handle disputes? etc. The reason I'm also sharing this is when I talk to parents, a few of them will come to me and say, because of you, I'm willing to let my child stay home 1 year and move to school at 3. Usually parents will send their children here at 2. But a few of my friends, people who are close to me, and parents who I've spoken to advocating on social media, I used to do that on Facebook. They will send me a message and say, oh, because of what you said, because of your story, because of how it affected you, I don't want my child to go through the same thing. So therefore, I have decided that I will keep my child at home for 1 year, let them enjoy playing as children, take them to school, or because of you, I will be moving my child to secondary school. So it has happened several times. People tell me that. And even in my own home, after my situation, my siblings, my younger siblings, were made to go through every class. It didn't matter how smart they were. My parents never let that same issue that I had come up with them. They always stood and said, no, even if you say our child is even if you say our child is how to qualified, yes, to move to a higher class, we won't do that because we know there's more to growing up besides academics. So
Thank
those
you.
are one
Thank you.
of my
Thank you for
story.
sharing that powerful story. I think, and you're obviously making an impact to a lot of people's life. And thank you for continuing to do that. As a storyteller, how do you balance creativity and authenticity, especially when telling a story inspired by real life event, like your real life event? How do you balance creativity and authenticity?
Okay. I would say one word: dramatization.
Mm,
While you want to say the story, one thing I always tell myself: whatever I cannot defend, I will not write. Because, like I said, I am at a stage in my life where legacy, my name, means a lot to me. So I am trying my best to ensure that whatever I can, whatever I put down, knowing that it will span a long time, it will be there probably forever. So it can be used against me. I want to be sure that everything I put down on social media, in a book, anything at all, is the truth as I know it. So if I want to be creative in writing a book, I can still be without twisting the story. I would make sure that what I write is the story I have or what I get from my clients. But we can add a little flair. The French will call it panache. We can add a little
mm,
dramatization. We can talk about, we often watch biographies or documentaries and they'll tell you, oh, the dramatization, it's inspired by real life stories. But of course, the dramatization, you don't expect that is exactly what happened. It's just the
mm,
creativity of the director or the scriptwriter. So it's the same thing with me. I understand this is a true life story. I will not change the main concepts in the story, but I can dramatize a little. I can add a little flair to the clothes they're wearing, the way I describe the house, the way I describe the weather, things that do not affect the authenticity of the story. So even when you're dramatizing, do not change the concept. So if someone was sad, you could indicate they are sad, but you can add a sorrowful music to the background. That way, it might not be the exact music they were listening to. Maybe they were not even listening to anything, but it has a way of invoking emotion from the reader, but it still sends the same message. They were sad, or they were grieving, or they were, wondering, or in a state of depression. So the key word is dramatization. Dramatize all you want, be creative, but do not change the main concept of the story.
Thank you for emphasizing preserving the main concept of the story and dramatizing or adding flair to the way you describe the scenery and the background. What advice do you give to an aspiring storyteller? If someone wants to start as a storyteller, what's your advice to them?
Okay, two things, anyways. I would say two things. Yesterday, I saw a spoken word artist, Harvey. I discovered her on LinkedIn yesterday. And one thing that stood out for me was she showed herself. She was bold in telling her story. Now, for anybody aspiring to be a storyteller, if you're going to be telling non-fiction story, that's true life stories or things inspired by true life stories, I would ask that you be bold. And you can only be bold if what you're saying you are sure of. So the first thing you should be sure, ensure to cross-check your facts. Once you have it, the courage to speak will be there because you
Mm,
know what you are saying is the truth. No one can say, oh, be quiet. What you're saying is not true or is not backed by statistics.
mm,
So the first thing first, ensure you have your facts. Once you have them, be bold in sending your message. Do
mm,
not allow anything hold you back. Speak from your heart. Let people hear you and say, she's passionate. That's one thing that continues to sell my brand, not because of anything else, is that I am passionate when I'm telling a story. In writing, in speaking, you will feel it. I am very passionate about it. So when you are speaking, be passionate. Let it come from the heart. Don't be fearful or scared or what people will say. Own your craft. Understand that you are telling a story that can impact another person. Stories are very powerful. Stories can change an entire life. A nation, it can change a lot of things. A child can hear a story and say, because of the story, I want to become like Will. I want to become like Dimma. So
Yeah.
it's very important that when you speak boldly. Let them feel it and say, this is who I want to be like. So as an inspiring storyteller, check your facts, be bold about telling your story, speak from the heart, and own your craft. Understand that it's a gift and you should use your gift to bless the world. So once you have all this together, just be yourself, and every other thing would work its way as you grow.
Thank you for the advice for someone who wants to start a storyteller. We talk a lot about your background, your love for writing, being bold and passionate about your writing. What are the three things you want people to remember?
Okay, the first thing I want people to remember is each and every one of us can become a miracle to another person. And when I say miracle, I do not always mean you have a handout to give out, or you can change the world, or you have the cure for cancer. I want you to always remember that the gift that is inside of you, someone needs it. It can change a life, it can impact a life. Each and every one of us has something in us that can impact the next generation. Beyond today, a child born tomorrow can see you, hear you, and be inspired by you. So come out and shine your light to as many as you can using whatever medium that you can. You do not have to speak like Dima. You do not have to write like Dima, but you have something. You may be able to sing, you may be able to dance, but always be intentional about it. Ensure that you are using it to make a difference in the world because we don't have forever. The little time you have, use it and bless someone. Be a miracle to as many as you can.
Hmm.
I think I've said things now. So the third one will be passionate about whatever it is that you are doing. Those are the three takeaways I want people to remember me for.
Thank you for sharing those three takeaway. Now I want to give you an opportunity to share with my audience how do they reach out to Dinma? What's the best way to get in touch with you? If you could share with my audience, or if there any project that you're currently working on.
Okay? I am reworking my memoir. It's called A Childhood Snatched by School. I'm talking about what I went through and how it kind of, like I said, snatched my childhood away. So I'm working on my memoir. I've worked on it before. It was published on Amazon, but I want to include a few things in it. So I took it down and it's now on pre order because we are working on it. So you can still go and pre order. It's A Childhood Snatched by School by Dima Mile Afam. And if you want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn at Dima Mile Afam. The name is the same on LinkedIn too. And for now, I am a biography writer and a speech reader and speech coach. Those are the things that I do. And if you need to reach out to me, LinkedIn is the best shot that you have. That's where I'm most active. And that's where I can respond to your messages or inquiries. Thank you very much for having me, Will. It's a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you, Dinma, for your time. I really appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your gift with my audience. Truly appreciate you spending time with me today. Thank you, Dinma. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.